there's still a massive tendency to communicate within silos. For example, we found that somebody who's in the same business unit, the same job function and sub-function, and the same office communicates about 1,000 times more frequently than two otherwise similar people who do not share those categories in common. So given that, the really interesting question becomes, how do some people communicate across boundaries in spite of this massive tendency to stay within your own lanes? The theory predicted is that given the strong role that formal structure plays in shaping communication patterns, that the overall effect of formal boundaries should dominate the effect of social categories. But that as a secondary effect, when we look within formal boundaries, social categories should matter. When we looked at gender-based communication overall, those are exactly the results that we found. Furthermore, when we split out the communication into men and women, we found exactly those results among men. So we were glad to see that the theory was confirmed there. But the big surprise, and I think the really interesting finding of this paper, is that women seem to communicate differently. When we look at interactions among women, they tend to interact with other women at a higher overall rate than men interact with other men. And furthermore, their interactions with other women occur at the same rate within business units and within offices compared to across business units or across offices. So the question then becomes, why is it that women are communicating with other women outside their business units or their offices? And how can both women and firms use these unexpected communications to their advantage? The second study looked at the role of mobility across a career in structuring people's networks. The first prediction is that people with diverse career histories will have broader, sparser networks that cross boundaries at a higher rate. But the second prediction is one that's perhaps a little bit more controversial, and that is that the people with the most boundary-spanning networks are people whose careers have been atypical. And the reason we expect this is people who have experienced mobility, but in a pretty typical fashion, will have more competition for knowledge, for provision of knowledge. So somebody who makes a move, for example, from a services function into the sales function will be accompanied by lots of other people who have made that same transition. In contrast to that, people who make unusual transitions will have ties to parts of the organization that nobody else has access to. And as a result, those ties will be particularly valuable. So the implications of this work really are several, both for individuals and for firms. For individuals, I think what it means is that they should look for opportunities to take advantage of boundary-spanning communications. And I think the suggestion that I would make is, at least from the perspective of networks, to not be afraid of an atypical transition. For firms, I think the implication is to place greater emphasis on the network benefits of mobility, with very subtle and very inexpensive ways of shifting the way rotational programs are framed without making really any substantive changes to the programs themselves. Firms could potentially capture a much greater share of that benefit that results from boundary-spanning communication ties.